To avoid being claimed, she pretended to be human for 15 years and almost succeeded. The palace servants knew her as the quiet girl who worked in the archives, the one who never spoke unless spoken to, the one who kept her eyes down and her presence small, as if she were trying to disappear into the stone walls themselves. They didn't know she was wearing a mask. Beneath the borrowed name and the careful silence, beneath the silver necklace that hummed with protective magic and swallowed every trace of her wolf, she was something the kingdom had been taught to fear. A half-blood, part shifter, part human, wholly forbidden. Her mother had died to give her this hiding place, had whispered with her last breath that if the world ever discovered what she was, they would either kill her or force her into a bond she could never escape, claimed by an alpha, stripped of choice, reduced to nothing more than a tool to strengthen someone else's bloodline. So she hid. For 15 years, she hid. And it worked. Until the day King Theron Ashenblade, the most feared alpha in 7 kingdoms, the reformer who had torn down a dozen ancient laws but could not touch the one that would decide her fate, brushed her hand in his private study and felt his wolf recognize its mate for the first time in his life. She registered as human. Completely, impossibly human. But his wolf didn't care what his senses told him. It knew what it wanted, and in a world built on hierarchy, destiny, and the sacred pull of the mate bond, what an alpha king wants, he claims. But to understand how a servant girl came to stand before a throne room full of nobles with a bond mark blazing on her neck and a secret that could destroy them both finally exposed, we need to go back to the beginning. The palace archive smelled like old parchment and dust. Mira had memorized that smell the way other people memorized prayers. It meant safety. It meant invisibility. She arrived before dawn, as always, when the corridors were still empty and the stone floors cold beneath her worn boots. The silver necklace rested against her collarbone, warm from her skin. She touched it without thinking. A habit. A promise. The archive room was tucked in the east wing, forgotten by most of the court. Rows of shelves stretched toward the vaulted ceiling, packed with records no one read anymore. Tax ledgers, trade agreements, marriage contracts from kingdoms that no longer existed. Myra lit the candles one by one and settled at her desk. Her job was simple. Catalog documents. Copy requests. Keep her head down. She had done it for 3 years without drawing attention, and she intended to keep it that way for the rest of her life. The necklace hummed faintly against her throat. Old magic. Her mother's last gift. Mira's fingers stilled on the parchment in front of her. She could still see her mother's face, the blood, the way her eyes had gone glassy even as she pressed the necklace into Mira's 8-year-old hands. "Never take this off," her mother had whispered. "Never shift. Never let them see your wolf." "Why?" Mira had sobbed. "Because if they find out what you are, they will kill you. Or worse." Her mother's grip had tightened. "They will force you into a bond. An alpha will claim you, and you will belong to him. You will be breeding stock, nothing more." Mira had worn the necklace every day since. It masked her scent, suppressed her wolf, made her register as human to every shifter in the kingdom. For 15 years, it had kept her alive. She pushed the memory away and focused on the ledger in front of her. Numbers, dates, things that didn't require feeling. The door opened. Mira's hand went to the necklace instinctively. Lord Garrett stepped into the archive, his pale eyes sweeping the room with the kind of disdain reserved for things beneath notice. He was King Theron's cousin and the head of the Traditionalist Council. Silver-haired, sharp-featured, cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. "You." His voice was clipped. "The king's correspondence from the southern provinces. Where is it?" Mira kept her eyes down. "Third shelf, my lord. East wall." He didn't thank her. He crossed to the shelf and pulled the box of letters without a word. She waited, barely breathing, until he turned to leave. "The kingdom is changing," Garrett said suddenly. He wasn't looking at her. The king believes progress means dismantling the old laws, allowing humans and wolves to mingle as if hierarchy doesn't matter, as if bloodlines don't matter. Mira said nothing. "He's wrong." Garrett's gaze flicked to her, cold and assessing. Some things should remain separate, pure. He left without waiting for a response. Mira's fingers tightened on the edge of her desk. Garrett believed in the old ways, the laws that said half-bloods were abominations, the laws that demanded they be executed or claimed, the laws King Theron was trying to dismantle. She had never met the king. She had seen him from a distance once, moving through the palace halls surrounded by guards, tall, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, the kind of presence that made people step aside without thinking. An alpha in every sense of the word. Mira had looked away before he could notice her. That was the safest thing to do. Stay invisible. Stay small. Stay human. The necklace pulsed against her skin, a steady rhythm that matched her heartbeat. She returned to her work. An hour passed. Then another. The morning light slanted through the high windows, turning the dust motes into tiny stars. Mira was halfway through transcribing a grain tax report when the door opened again. This time, it was a palace messenger. Young, nervous, he clutched a sealed letter in one hand. "The king requires a scribe," the boy said quickly, "to organize his private library. Head archivist Elena recommended you." Mira's stomach dropped. "I'm sure there are others more qualified." "The king asked for someone who knows the old filing systems." The messenger shifted his weight. "You're to report to his study this afternoon." He didn't wait for her to argue. He set the letter on her desk and left. Mira stared at the parchment. The royal seal stared back. Crimson wax. The wolf sigil of House Ashenblade. Her wolf stirred for the first time in weeks. A faint pulse beneath the necklace's magic. Not strong enough to break through. Just enough to make her chest ache. She touched the silver pendant again. 15 years. 15 years of hiding. 15 years of building a life where no one looked at her twice. And now she was being summoned to work in close quarters with the most powerful alpha in the northern kingdoms. The man whose reforms were the only thing standing between her and the old bloodlaws. The man whose wolf would recognize her the moment the necklace failed. Mira closed her eyes. She couldn't refuse. A summons from the king wasn't a request, and running would only draw attention. She would go. She would keep her head down. She would do the work and leave before anyone noticed her. It would be fine. It had to be fine. The necklace burned warm against her throat, and somewhere deep inside her chest, her wolf pressed against the edges of its cage. Human, Mira reminded herself. You are human. She had to be, because the alternative would cost her everything. The king's private study smelled like leather and pine smoke, rich, warm. Nothing like the archive's dust and silence. Mira stood in the doorway with her arms full of cataloging supplies and tried to remember how to breathe. King Theron Ashenblade sat behind a massive oak desk, his attention fixed on a scroll covered in dense script. He didn't look up when she entered, didn't acknowledge her at all. She should have been relieved. Instead, something in her chest pulled tight. "Set them anywhere," he said without lifting his gaze. His voice was deeper than she'd expected. Rougher. Mira crossed the room in careful, measured steps. The study was larger than her entire quarters. Shelves lined 3 walls, packed with books in varying states of disarray. Maps were scattered across a side table. Correspondence sat in uneven piles near the window. She set the supplies on the edge of his desk, keeping her movements small and quiet. Her hand brushed his. Just for a second, barely contact at all. The world tilted. Heat flooded through her, sharp and fierce and utterly wrong. Her wolf woke with a jolt, surging against the necklace's magic like it was trying to claw its way out of her skin. The silver pendant burned cold against her throat. No. Mira jerked her hand back, but the damage was done. Across the desk, the king had gone completely still. His silver-gray eyes snapped up to meet hers, wide and unguarded. Shock rippled across his face. His knuckles went white where they gripped the edge of the scroll. Mira took a step back. Then another. Her wolf was screaming. Not words, just raw, desperate need. The necklace pulsed against her skin, working frantically to suppress the surge of instinct trying to break free. "Stay," her wolf howled. "Mine. Ours." The king stood slowly, like he was moving through water. His gaze never left her face. "What?" His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "What is your name?" "Mira." The word came out barely louder than a whisper. "Mira." He repeated it like he was testing the shape of it. "How long have you worked in the palace?" 3 years, Your Majesty." He circled the desk, each step deliberate, controlled. Mira's pulse hammered in her ears. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could smell him properly now. Cedar and steel. Clean and sharp and utterly overwhelming. Her wolf whined. The king tilted his head slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. His brow furrowed. "You're human," he said quietly. It wasn't a question, but there was confusion in his voice. Disbelief. Mira nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. He leaned closer, just slightly, and inhaled. Nothing. She knew what he was searching for. The scent that would confirm what his wolf was telling him. The aura that marked every shifter, faint or strong. The necklace swallowed it all. To him, she was completely, impossibly human. But his wolf didn't care. She could see it in his eyes. The war between instinct and reason. Between what he felt and what made sense. "I don't understand," he murmured, more to himself than to her. Mira took another step back. Her shoulders hit the bookshelf, trapped. The king blinked, seeming to realize how close he'd gotten. He retreated half a step, but his gaze stayed locked on her face. "Forgive me." His voice was rough, strained. "I don't know what." He stopped, shook his head. Mira's fingers found the necklace, gripping the pendant hard enough that the edges bit into her palm. "Hold," she begged silently. "Please hold. The library needs organizing," the king said finally. His tone had shifted. Formal now. Controlled. "You'll work here. Daily, until it's complete." "Your Majesty, I'm sure someone more qualified. You're assigned." His eyes flashed. Not anger. Something else. Something desperate. "Report here each afternoon. Is that understood?" Mira's throat tightened. She should refuse, should find an excuse, should run before this became something she couldn't escape. But kings didn't ask, they commanded. And servants didn't argue. "Yes, Your Majesty." He nodded once, sharply, and turned back to his desk. Dismissed. Mira fled. She made it halfway down the corridor before her knees went weak. She pressed her back against the cold stone wall and closed her eyes. Her wolf was still awake, still straining against the magic that kept it caged. "Mate," it whispered. "Go back." "Ours." No, she couldn't. She wouldn't. The necklace had held. Barely. But it had held. She just needed to be more careful. Keep her distance. Finish the work quickly and get out before anything else could go wrong. It would be fine. She repeated it like a prayer, all the way back to the archive. Behind her, in his private study, King Theron Ashenblade stood with his hands braced on his desk, and his wolf howling a single word over and over again in his mind. Mate. The human woman with the dark braid and amber eyes. The servant who had barely looked at him. Who had no scent, no aura, no wolf. His wolf didn't care. It recognized her. And Theron had no idea how that was possible. The king was always there. Day 1, Mira arrived at his study with her cataloging supplies and found him at his desk, reading correspondence. He glanced up when she entered, nodded once, and returned to his work. She told herself it was fine. She could work around him. Day 2, he asked her name again, as if he'd forgotten, as if he needed to hear her say it. "Mira," she murmured, keeping her eyes on the shelf in front of her. "Mira," he repeated softly. The way he said it made her wolf press against her ribs. Day 3, he moved his chair, closer to where she was working. Not obvious, just a few feet, close enough that she could smell cedar and steel every time she turned around. By day 4, she realized he wasn't working at all. He was watching her. Mira kept her movements careful and small. She sorted books by subject and date, made notes in her ledger, and tried to ignore the weight of his gaze on the back of her neck. It didn't work. Every time she reached for a high shelf, he appeared at her side. "Let me," he said, his hand steadying her elbow as she stretched for a volume on military campaigns. His touch was warm, deliberate. Her wolf went still, then surged forward with a desperate whine. Mira pulled away the moment she had the book in her hands. "Thank you, Your Majesty." He didn't move, didn't step back. "You don't need to be so formal," he said quietly. "We're alone. Alone." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning she didn't want to examine. "It's appropriate," Mira said. "Is it?" His voice was softer now, almost uncertain. "I don't feel like a king when you're here." Mira's fingers tightened on the book. She didn't know how to respond to that, didn't know what he wanted from her. Theron stepped back finally, giving her space. But the air still felt too thick, too warm. Day 5, he took a book from her hands as she was carrying it to the cataloging table. Their fingers brushed. The bond flared, bright and sharp. Mira gasped before she could stop herself. The king's eyes widened. His hand lingered on hers for a heartbeat too long before he pulled away. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I didn't mean to startle you." But he had felt it too. She could see it in his face, the confusion, the longing. Day 6, he stopped pretending to work entirely. He sat in the chair by the window and simply watched her. Not hiding it, not looking away when she glanced in his direction. "Why are you staring at me?" Mira finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know." His honesty was worse than a lie. "I can't seem to help it," her wolf growled low. "Want, need." Mira forced herself to focus on the shelf in front of her, on the task, on anything but the way his gaze made her skin feel too tight. Day 7, everything changed. Mira was balancing on the step stool, reaching for a leather-bound atlas wedged between two larger volumes, when her foot slipped. She didn't fall. The king caught her. One arm around her waist, the other steadying her shoulder, pulling her back against his chest. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. His breath was warm against her ear. His heartbeat thundered against her back. The bond hummed between them, undeniable and overwhelming. "Mine," her wolf whispered. "Ours. Stay. Are you all right?" His voice was rough, strained. Mira nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. He set her down carefully, his hands lingering at her waist even after her feet touched solid ground. She turned to face him. Mistake. They were too close, close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his gray eyes, close enough that his scent wrapped around her like a physical thing. "I don't understand what's happening," he said quietly. "My wolf knows you, recognizes you, but you're human." "I am," Mira whispered. "Then why does it feel like this?" His hand lifted, almost touching her cheek, then fell away. "Why do I?" The door opened. Lord Garrett stood in the threshold, his pale blue eyes sweeping the study. They landed on Mira first, then on Theron, on the space between them that was far too small for king and servant. His expression darkened. "Your Majesty," Garrett said, his tone clipped. "The council is waiting." Theron didn't move. "I'll be there shortly. They've been waiting for an hour. Then another few minutes won't matter." Garrett's gaze flicked to Mira again, assessing. "Cold, as you wish." He stepped back into the corridor but didn't close the door. A reminder. A warning. The moment shattered. Mira stepped away from the king, putting the cataloging table between them. "You should go," she said. "I don't want to." The raw honesty in his voice nearly broke her. "Your Majesty, Theron." His jaw tightened. "When we're alone, call me Theron." She couldn't, wouldn't. Using his name would make this real, would make the bond harder to deny. "The council is waiting," she said instead. He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Tomorrow," he said. "You'll be here tomorrow." It wasn't a question. Mira watched him leave, watched Garrett's cold gaze follow him down the corridor, and knew she was running out of time. That evening, the king returned to his study alone. Mira was gone, but her scent lingered, faint, almost imperceptible. Except it wasn't her scent, not really. There was nothing to smell, nothing to track, nothing to prove his wolf wasn't losing its mind. But when he closed his eyes, he could still feel the weight of her in his arms, could still hear the hitch in her breath when their fingers touched. She was human. His wolf didn't care. The next afternoon, Mira arrived to find the king already waiting. "The first need to ask you something," he said before she could even set down her supplies. Her pulse jumped. "Your Majesty, why do you flinch every time I get close?" The question was gentle, but his voice carried the unmistakable weight of an alpha command, not an order, a compulsion. Mira's wolf surged forward, responding to the call in his voice before she could stop it. For one terrible second, her eyes flashed gold. The king went completely still. Mira slammed her will down hard, forcing her wolf back into its cage, but the damage was done. He had seen it. Human eyes didn't flash gold. Human eyes didn't glow. Human eyes didn't answer an alpha's call. Human eyes didn't belong to her at all. Mira didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed with the necklace clutched in her fist and waited for the knock that would mean guards, discovery, the end of everything. It never came. The next day, she stayed in the archive. She didn't go to the king's study. She told herself he wouldn't notice, that he had councils to attend and a kingdom to run, that the flash of gold in her eyes had been too quick for him to see. She was wrong. The council chamber smelled like old wood and tension. Theron sat at the head of the long table, surrounded by advisors who were supposed to serve him but felt more like wardens. Lord Garrett stood at the opposite end, his pale eyes fixed on the king with something that looked like patience but tasted like ambition. "Your Majesty, the matter is simple," Garrett said. His voice was cool, measured. "You need an heir. The reforms you've enacted are fragile. Without a clear line of succession, they will crumble the moment you fall." "I am not dead yet," Theron said, "but you are alone." Garrett gestured to the council members seated along both sides of the table. "Every alpha in this kingdom has a mate, a bond, an anchor. You have refused every suitable match we've presented. The council has been patient, but patience has limits." Theron's jaw tightened. "I will not bond for politics, then bond for duty." Garrett leaned forward. "Lady Serena of House Whitestone is willing. Her bloodline is strong. Her wolf is compatible. She would make a suitable queen. My wolf has not chosen her." The words came out sharper than Theron intended. The council murmured. "Your wolf," Garrett said slowly, "seems to have chosen a human servant." The room went silent. Theron's hands flattened on the table. Every instinct screamed at him to defend Mira, to tell them all to go to hell, but he couldn't. Because Garrett was right, his wolf had chosen her, a woman who had no scent, no wolf, no place in this world. A woman whose eyes had flashed gold for one impossible second. "My personal affairs are not the council's concern," Theron said finally. "They are when they make you look weak." Garrett's tone sharpened. "You spend hours alone with a servant girl while the kingdom waits for an heir. The traditionalist houses are watching, waiting for you to falter." "Then let them watch." Garrett's expression darkened. "Your Majesty, I ask the council to vote. Either the king selects a mate from the noble houses within the month, or we begin formal proceedings to question his fitness to rule." The council erupted. Theron stood. His alpha voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Enough." Everyone fell silent. "I will choose my own mate," Theron said quietly, "and I will do it on my own terms. This meeting is over." He left before anyone could argue. Theron found Mira in the garden an hour later. She was sitting on a stone bench beneath the old oak tree, her cataloging ledger forgotten in her lap. She looked up when he approached, and he saw the exhaustion in her face. The fear. "You didn't come to the study today," he said. "I thought you might need space." Her voice was soft, careful. "I don't want space." He sat beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her but not touching. I want to understand what's happening between us. Mira's fingers tightened on the ledger. Your Majesty. The council wants me to choose a mate from the noble houses, Theron said. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the garden wall, at the ivy climbing toward the sky. They say my wolf should have bonded by now, that waiting for the pull is foolish. Maybe they're right. He turned to her then. Do you believe that? Mira met his gaze, those amber eyes that haunted him, that made his wolf howl every time she was near. I think you should do what's best for your kingdom, she said quietly. And if what's best for my kingdom isn't what my wolf wants, then you have a choice to make. Theron leaned closer, not crowding her, just close enough that she would have to look away if she wanted to avoid him. She didn't look away. My wolf has never responded to anyone, he said. Not in 8 years. I thought something was wrong with me, that I was broken. You're not broken. Then why do I feel this when you're near? His voice dropped. Raw, vulnerable. Why does my wolf recognize you when you have no scent? No wolf, no bond. Mira's breath caught. Tell him, her heart begged. Tell him the truth. But she couldn't. Because the truth would destroy him, would force him to choose between his reforms and her life. I don't know, she whispered instead. Theron reached for her hand, slow enough that she could pull away. She didn't. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady, and the bond flared between them. Undeniable. Impossible. Come to the harvest ball with me, he said. Mira stared at him. What? 3 nights from now. The court will expect me to choose a mate. I want them to see you at my side. I'm a servant. You're the woman my wolf chose. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Please. The word broke something in her chest. She should say no. Should run before this became something she couldn't escape. But her wolf was pressing against her ribs, desperate and aching, and the necklace felt like a cage she had worn for far too long. One night, Mira heard herself say. Just one. Theron's smile was brief but genuine. One night, he agreed. He left her there in the garden, her hand still warm from his touch, and her wolf clawing for freedom. That evening, Lord Garrett descended into the palace archive alone. The head archivist had gone home for the night. The corridors were empty. No one to see him slip between the shelves and begin pulling reports from 15 years ago. Hunting records, execution orders, testimonies from the southern provinces. He knew what he was looking for. The half-blood hunts had been thorough, brutal. Every abomination found and eliminated, except one. A girl, 8 years old, escaped with the help of a dying witch who gave her something the hunters couldn't track. A silver necklace. Garrett had been there that night, had watched the woman die protecting her child, had seen the flash of silver around the girl's throat as she disappeared into the forest. He had never forgotten it. And now, 15 years later, he had seen that same necklace in the palace. Around the throat of the servant girl his cousin couldn't stop watching. Garrett pulled the report from the shelf and read it by candlelight. Description of the child, dark hair, amber eyes, small for her age. Description of the necklace, silver pendant, old magic, untrackable. He smiled. The king's little human wasn't human at all, and when Garrett exposed her, Theron would have to choose between his precious reforms and the abomination he wanted to claim as his mate. Either way, the throne would be Garrett's. He tucked the report into his coat and left the archive in silence, already planning his next move. The dress didn't fit. It was beautiful, deep blue silk that one of the palace seamstresses had altered for her in 2 days. But Mira felt like she was wearing someone else's skin. She stood at the entrance to the grand ballroom and tried to remember how to breathe. Music drifted through the open doors. Strings and flutes, bright and festive. Inside, nobles swirled in elaborate gowns and formal court attire, their laughter echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Mira didn't belong here. You came. Theron's voice was warm, relieved. She turned to find him standing behind her, dressed in formal blacks with the silver wolf sigil of House Ashenblade embroidered across his chest. He looked every inch the king, and he was looking at her like she was the only person in the room. "I said I would," Mira murmured. "I wasn't sure you'd keep your word." He offered his arm. "You have a habit of running." Her fingers trembled as she placed her hand on his sleeve. The bond flared the moment they touched, warm and insistent. "Mine," her wolf whispered. "Ours." Theron led her into the ballroom, and every head turned. The conversations didn't stop, but they shifted. Nobles leaned toward each other, whispering behind jeweled fans. Eyes tracked Mira's progress across the floor. The servant girl on the king's arm, Lady Serena, stood near the dais, her golden hair swept into an elegant twist, her smile frozen in place as she watched Theron guide Mira to the center of the room. Lord Garrett stood in the shadows near the far wall, his pale eyes fixed on them with an expression Mira couldn't read. "Ignore them," Theron said quietly. "They're staring. Let them." His hand settled at the small of her back, steady and warm. "Dance with me." The music shifted. A waltz. Mira had never danced a waltz in her life. "I don't know how." "Follow my lead." He pulled her into position, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers, and suddenly the rest of the room fell away. They moved together. His steps confident and sure, hers hesitant but guided. He didn't let her stumble, didn't let her fall. "You're doing perfectly," he murmured. Mira looked up and found him watching her with an intensity that made her chest ache. This close, she could see the silver flecks in his gray eyes, could smell cedar and steel and something uniquely him, could feel his heartbeat where her hand rested on his shoulder. Her wolf pressed against her ribs, desperate and aching. "Stay," it begged. "Don't run, stay." "Why are you doing this?" Mira asked softly. "Dancing with you? All of it. The council wants you to choose a noble mate, someone who can give you heirs and alliances. I'm everything I want," Theron said. The words hit her like a physical blow. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." His hand tightened at her waist, pulling her closer. "My wolf chose you, and I trust that more than any council's advice." The music swelled around them. Other couples spun past in blurs of color and motion, but Mira couldn't look away from him. "I can't give you what you need," she whispered. "You already have." The song ended. Theron didn't let her go. "Come with me," he said. He led her through the crowd, past the curious stares and whispered speculation, out through the glass doors onto the balcony. The night air was cool against Mira's flushed skin. The scent of night-blooming jasmine drifted up from the gardens below. They were alone. Theron turned to face her, his expression raw and unguarded in a way she had never seen before. "I don't care that you're human," he said quietly. "I don't care what the council thinks. My wolf knows what it wants, and He stopped, shook his head. "I can't explain it. I've spent 8 years waiting to feel this, and now that I have, I'm not letting it go." Mira's fingers found the necklace at her throat. "Tell him," her heart begged. "Tell him the truth." But the truth would destroy him, would force him to choose between his reforms and her life. "Let me court you properly," Theron said. "No more hiding, no more pretending this isn't happening between us." "Theron, I know you feel it too. I can see it in your eyes every time I touch you." He was right. She did feel it. The bond, the pull, the desperate, aching need to close the distance between them and never let go. But loving him meant condemning him. "I can't," Mira whispered. "Why not?" "Because," the words died in her throat, "because I'm not human. Because I'm the thing your kingdom was taught to hate. Because if you knew what I was, the law would demand my death or my claiming, and either way you would lose everything you've built." She couldn't say any of it. So she did the only thing she could. She kissed him. It was desperate, reckless, a terrible mistake, and it was the most honest thing she had ever done. Theron went still for half a heartbeat. Then his arms came around her, pulling her close, and he kissed her back like she was air and he had been drowning. His mouth was warm, demanding. His hands tangled in her hair, tilting her head to deepen the kiss. The bond between them blazed to life, bright and undeniable, and Mira felt her wolf surge forward with a desperate cry. Mate, ours. Finally. The necklace burned cold against her throat, fighting to suppress the surge of instinct trying to break free. Theron pulled back just enough to rest his forehead against hers, his breathing ragged. I want to claim you, he whispered. Right now. Right here. I want everyone to know you're mine. The words shattered something in Mira's chest. She pulled away. I can't give you what you need. Mira, I'm sorry. She ran. Past the ballroom, past the nobles who turned to stare, past Lady Serena's cold gaze and Lord Garrett's calculating smile. She didn't stop until she reached her quarters. The door slammed shut behind her. Mira collapsed against it, her whole body shaking. Her wolf was clawing at her from the inside, desperate to return to him, to finish what they had started. And the necklace? The necklace was burning. Not cold anymore. Hot, searing against her skin like it was trying to brand her. Mira ripped it off and stared at the silver pendant in her palm. The magic was failing. 15 years of suppression, and the bond with Theron was strong enough to break through it. She could feel her wolf pressing against the edges of the spell, straining toward freedom. Toward him. Mira sank to the floor, still clutching the necklace, and let the tears come. Across the palace, Lord Garrett stood in the shadows of the ballroom and smiled. He had seen the kiss. Had seen the way the servant girl's scent flickered for just a moment, bright and unmistakable, before the necklace's magic slammed back into place. He had all the proof he needed. Now, it was just a matter of timing. Mira wrote the letter before dawn. Her hand shook as she formed the words. Simple, clean, a resignation with no explanation beyond personal circumstances. She left it on Theron's desk while the palace still slept, then returned to her quarters to pack. She didn't have much. A few changes of clothes. Her mother's necklace, cool and silent against her throat now that she'd forced it back on. The small bag of coins she'd saved over 3 years of careful work. Everything fit into a single canvas bag. Mira was halfway down the servants' corridor when she heard footsteps behind her. Where are you going? Theron's voice was rough, unsteady. She turned slowly. He stood at the end of the hallway, still wearing the formal blacks from the ball, his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it all night. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. I'm leaving, Mira said quietly. I can see that. He took a step closer. Why? I told you last night. I can't give you what you need. That's not an answer. His jaw tightened. What happened? The kiss was a mistake. The words came out sharper than she intended. She watched him flinch, watched the hurt flash across his face, and hated herself for it. A mistake, he repeated. Yes. Theron crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. He didn't touch her, didn't crowd her, but he was close enough that she could smell cedar and steel and sleepless exhaustion. Look me in the eye and tell me you don't feel anything when I'm near, he said. Mira lifted her chin, met his gaze. I don't feel anything. The lie tasted like ash. Her wolf whined, desperate and aching. Theron stared at her, searching, looking for the truth she was hiding behind careful walls. You're lying. I'm not. Then why are your hands shaking? Mira's fingers tightened on the strap of her bag. You should choose someone from the noble houses, she said. Someone who can give you heirs and alliances. Someone who makes sense. I don't want someone who makes sense. His voice dropped. Raw. I want you. The words broke something in her chest. Tell him, her heart begged. Tell him the truth, but the truth would destroy him, would force him to choose between loving her and losing everything he had built. I'm sorry, Mira whispered, but I can't stay. She pushed past him before he could argue, before she could change her mind. Theron didn't follow. He stood in the empty corridor, long after she was gone, his wolf howling in his chest, and tried to understand what had just happened. She had kissed him like she was drowning and he was air. And then she had looked him in the eye and lied. Something was wrong. Something she wasn't telling him, but she was gone, and he had no right to chase her. No right to demand answers she clearly didn't want to give. Theron returned to his chambers and didn't leave for 2 days. Mira found a boarding house on the east side of the city. Small, cheap, anonymous. The room smelled like mildew and old smoke, but it had a lock on the door and a narrow bed and a window that looked out over the crowded street below. It was nothing like the palace. It was safe. She told herself that was enough. Her wolf didn't agree. It paced inside her like a caged thing, restless and furious, pressing against the necklace's magic with increasing desperation. "Go back," it growled. "Mate, ours. Go back." Mira pressed her palm against the cold glass of the window and tried to breathe. She had done the right thing. She had protected him, protected his reforms, his throne, his future. The fact that it felt like she had carved out her own heart with a dull knife didn't matter. 2 weeks passed. Theron didn't attend council meetings, didn't respond to requests for audience, didn't leave his chambers except to walk the palace walls at night when no one would see him. His wolf was fractured, raging. It didn't understand why their mate had left. Didn't understand why Theron wasn't chasing her. Captain Aldrich tried to talk to him. Elena from the archive sent word asking if he needed anything. Theron ignored them all. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except the ghost of her scent and the memory of her lips on his. In the council chamber, Lord Garrett seized his opportunity. "The king is unfit," he said calmly. "His obsession with a human servant has compromised his judgment. He refuses to attend to matters of state, refuses to choose a proper mate. The kingdom suffers for his weakness." The council murmured agreement. "I call for a formal vote," Garrett continued. "Either the king selects a mate from the noble houses within the month, or we begin proceedings to challenge his fitness to rule." The vote passed. Unanimously. That night, Garrett's hunters spread through the city. They asked questions in taverns and boarding houses, showed a sketch to innkeepers and shopkeepers, followed rumors of a dark-haired woman who kept to herself and wore a silver necklace. 2 weeks after Mira left the palace, they found her. Garrett stood across the street from the boarding house and looked up at the narrow window on the 3rd floor. Through the glass, he could see her silhouette, could see the glint of silver at her throat. The same necklace he had seen 15 years ago, the night her mother died. He smiled. The half-blood had been hiding in plain sight all along. And now, thanks to the king's broken heart and the council's impatience, Garrett had everything he needed to destroy them both. 3 weeks later, they came for her at dawn. Mira woke to the sound of boots on the stairs and knew, before the door burst open, that her time had run out. She didn't fight when they dragged her from the bed, didn't scream when they bound her wrists in iron chains. She had known this was coming from the moment she saw Garrett's smile across the ballroom. She had just hoped for more time. The throne room was packed. Nobles lined the walls, whispering behind jeweled hands. Council members sat in their formal seats, their expressions carefully neutral. And Theron stood on the dais, his face haggard and pale, staring at her like he was seeing a ghost. Mira's chest ached at the sight of him. 3 weeks apart had carved him hollow. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His jaw was sharper. His hands were clenched at his sides like he was holding himself back by force. Lord Garrett stood at the center of the room, holding a scroll. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying through the chamber. "The council has uncovered evidence of a crime that cannot be ignored." Theron's gaze flicked to Garrett, cold, wary. "What crime?" 15 years ago, a half-blood girl escaped a sanctioned hunt in the southern provinces. She was 8 years old. Her mother died protecting her, and the girl was never found. The room went silent. Mira's wolf bristled, pressing against the necklace's suppression. "I have testimonies from the hunters who were present that night," Garrett continued. "They remember the girl. Dark hair, amber eyes, and a silver necklace her mother gave her before she died." He turned to face Mira directly. "The same necklace worn by this woman." The council murmured. Theron went absolutely still. "You're suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything, Your Majesty. I'm stating a fact." Garrett's smile was cold. "The woman you've been obsessed with is a half-blood, an abomination under the old blood laws, and those laws have not yet been overturned. Mira's fingers tightened on the chains. She should say something, deny it, fight back, but there was no point. The truth had finally caught up to her. The old blood laws are barbaric. Theron said quietly, I have been working to dismantle them. But they are still law, Garrett countered, and until they are formally abolished, they must be enforced. You want me to execute her. I want you to uphold the laws of this kingdom. Garrett's voice hardened. Half-bloods are abominations. They contaminate bloodlines. They must be eliminated or claimed by an alpha to prevent their taint from spreading. Theron's jaw tightened. I will not. Then I call for a vote. Garrett turned to the council. The old blood laws demand that half-bloods discovered within the kingdom be brought before the court for judgment. All in favor of enforcing the law? Hands rose around the room. Too many hands. The vote passed. Theron's alpha voice rang out, sharp and commanding. Stand down. But Garrett was already moving. He crossed to where Mira knelt and reached for the necklace at her throat. Don't, Mira whispered. He ripped it free. The magic shattered. For 15 years the necklace had held her wolf in check, suppressed her scent, hidden what she was. Now, with nothing to contain it, her wolf exploded outward in a wave of golden light. The entire court gasped. Mira's aura blazed through the throne room, undeniable and overwhelming. Not fully shifter, not fully human, something in between, something forbidden. Half-blood. Garrett smiled. The law is clear, he said. She must be executed unless an alpha claims her as mate and takes responsibility for her bloodline. The chains on Mira's wrists felt impossibly heavy. She looked up and found Theron staring at her. Not with disgust, not with horror, with understanding. That's why you ran, he said quietly. Mira's throat tightened. I'm sorry. You thought I would choose the law over you. You should, she whispered. You spent years building these reforms. If you claim me now, you'll lose everything. The traditionalists will use it against you. The council will turn. Your throne. I don't care about the throne. The words cut through the throne room like a blade. Theron stepped down from the dais. The council erupted. Voices rose in protest, in shock, in fury. He ignored them all. He crossed the throne room and knelt beside her. I should have seen it sooner, he said. His hand lifted to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Should have understood why you flinched. Why you ran. You weren't rejecting me. You were protecting me. Theron, I claim her. The declaration rang through the chamber. Silence fell. Garrett's expression darkened. Your Majesty, claiming a half-blood will delegitimize your entire reign. You cannot. I can. Theron's voice was steel. And I will. He turned to face the council, still kneeling beside Mira, his hand warm against her skin. She is my mate, he said. My wolf chose her, and I will not let her die. Garrett's voice cut through the throne room like a blade. Your Majesty, you cannot be serious. Theron didn't look at him. His gaze stayed locked on Mira, kneeling in chains, her golden aura still blazing around her like sunlight. I have never been more serious in my life. Claiming a half-blood will destroy everything you've built. Garrett's tone sharpened. The traditionalist houses will revolt. The council will turn against you. Your reforms will die before they can take root. Then let them die. The throne room erupted. Voices rose in shock and fury. Council members stood from their seats. Nobles pressed forward, their faces twisted with disgust or disbelief. Theron ignored them all. He crossed the floor and knelt beside Mira. His hand found hers, warm and steady despite the iron chains binding her wrists. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I should have seen it sooner. Should have understood why you ran. You weren't rejecting me. You were trying to protect me. Mira's throat tightened. You still can, she whispered. Walk away. Choose someone else. Your throne means nothing without you. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gentle touch that made her wolf surge forward with desperate hope. I spent 8 years waiting to feel this, Saren said. waiting for my wolf to recognize its mate. And when it finally happened, I didn't understand. I couldn't figure out why you felt human when everything in me was screaming that you were mine. Tears burned at the corners of Mira's eyes. Now I know, he continued. You were hiding, protecting yourself, and I'm done letting you carry that burden alone. He turned to face the council, still kneeling at her side. I claim her as my mate, Theron said. His alpha voice rang through the hall, undeniable and absolute. Not because the law demands it, because she is mine, and I am hers, and I will not let her die for a crime she committed by being born. Garrett stepped forward. Your Majesty, this is madness. The old blood laws exist for a reason. Half-bloods contaminate. Enough. Theron's voice cracked like a whip. I am done listening to laws built on fear and hatred. If this council will not accept my mate, then challenge me for the throne. Silence fell. No one moved. Theron's gaze swept the room, daring anyone to step forward. I declare the old blood laws void, he said. His alpha voice carried the weight of absolute command. There will be no more half-blood hunts in my kingdom. No more forced claimings. No more executions for the crime of existing. Mira's wolf howled with joy and terror in equal measure. Theron, she whispered, this will cost you everything. He looked down at her, and the tenderness in his expression nearly broke her. You are everything, he said simply. Then he leaned forward and pressed his lips to her throat. The bond surged between them, white-hot and overwhelming. Mira felt his wolf calling to hers, felt the pull that had been there from the first moment they touched finally allowed to complete. His teeth grazed her skin. Are you sure? He murmured against her neck. I'm yours, her heart cried out. I've always been yours. Yes, Mira whispered. Theron bit down. The claiming mark blazed across her skin like lightning. Mira felt the bond snap into place with a force that drove the air from her lungs. Cedar and steel and home, flooding through her veins, weaving into her soul until she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. Her wolf surged forward, finally free, finally recognized, finally home. The chains on her wrists shattered. Mira's hands found Theron's face, tilting his head to expose the strong column of his throat. Her wolf knew what to do, had always known. She bit down on the junction of his neck and shoulder. The taste of copper and magic flooded her mouth. The bond completed with a surge of power that lit the entire throne room in golden light. Theron's mark on her neck, Mira's mark on his, mate. Finally, the court gasped. When Mira pulled back, she could feel Theron's heartbeat as clearly as her own, could feel his wolf twined with hers, inseparable and whole. He was smiling. There, Theron said softly. Now try to take her from me. Garrett's expression was ice. You've signed your own death warrant, cousin. Then come and collect. Garrett's smile was cold and sharp. I invoke the right of challenge. If you will not uphold the laws of this kingdom, then you are unfit to rule. I challenge you for the throne, King Theron Ashenblade, and when I win, the half-blood dies. Theron stood slowly, pulling Mira to her feet beside him. I accept your challenge. The throne room went silent. Garrett began to shift. His bones cracked and reformed, his body elongating into the sleek silver form of his wolf, larger than most, powerful. A true alpha. Theron's hand tightened on Mira's for one brief moment. Then he let go and shifted. His wolf was massive, dark gray, almost black, with silver eyes that burned with the intensity of a bonded mate. He stood between Mira and Garrett, a wall of muscle and fury, and his growls shook the stones beneath their feet. The entire court watched as the two wolves circled each other in the center of the throne room, teeth bared, preparing for a fight that would decide the fate of the kingdom. They collided in the center of the throne room with a force that shook the stones. Garrett was fast, vicious. He went for Theron's throat immediately, teeth flashing silver in the torchlight. Theron twisted away, his larger frame absorbing the impact as Garrett's jaws closed on empty air. The court pressed back against the walls, giving the wolves room. Mira stood frozen, her wrists still aching where the chains had been. Through the bond, she could feel everything: Theron's focus, his determination, the way his wolf was burning with 15 years of repressed need finally unleashed. Garrett lunged again. This time, his teeth found purchase, tearing into Theron's shoulder. Blood spattered across the marble floor. Mira's wolf roared. Protect, fight, mate in danger. But she couldn't shift, had never shifted, didn't know how. The wolves separated, circling each other. Garrett's pale eyes gleamed with triumph. Theron's breathing was labored, blood matting the dark fur of his shoulder. They clashed again, claws and teeth and brutal alpha power. Garrett was skilled, precise. He had trained for this his entire life, waiting for the moment when Theron would make a mistake big enough to justify a challenge. But Theron was fighting for something Garrett would never understand. He was fighting for his mate. The bond between them blazed brighter with every blow, feeding Theron's strength he didn't know he had. Mira felt it surging through her chest, felt his wolf calling to hers, demanding she answer. Garrett caught Theron's back leg, sending him crashing to the ground. No. Mira's wolf exploded forward with a violence that stole her breath. For 15 years, she had kept it caged, suppressed, hidden. Not anymore. Her body shifted before her conscious mind could process what was happening. Bones cracked and reformed. Her vision sharpened. Her senses flooded with scent and sound and the overwhelming need to protect the mate bond she had just claimed. The transformation was agony and ecstasy in equal measure. When it was done, Mira stood on 4 legs for the first time in her life. Her wolf was smaller than an alpha's, leaner. Golden fur that caught the torchlight and gleamed like the aura that had given her away. Half-blood. The court gasped. Mira didn't care. She launched herself at Garrett with a speed that came from instinct, not training. Garrett hadn't expected her. His attention was on Theron, on the wounded king struggling to rise. He didn't see her coming until her teeth sank into his flank. He yelped and spun, trying to shake her off. Mira held on. Theron surged to his feet, his silver eyes blazing. Together, they drove Garrett back Theron's power, and Mira's speed working in perfect synchronization, the bond between them singing with shared purpose. Garrett tried to fight back, tried to separate them. But he was facing 2 wolves who would die before they let each other go. Theron caught Garrett's throat and drove him to the ground, held him there, pinned and helpless. One bite would end it. The throne room went silent. Garrett's pale eyes stared up at Theron, waiting for death. Theron's jaws tightened. Then he let go. He shifted back to human form, standing over Garrett's wolf, with blood dripping from his shoulder and his chest heaving. "Get up," Theron said quietly. Garrett shifted slowly, warily. Theron's voice rang through the hall, carrying the weight of absolute alpha authority. "Lord Garrett Ashenblade, you are hereby stripped of your titles and exiled from the Northern Kingdoms. You and every council member who voted for my mate's execution have 1 hour to leave the palace. If you are found within my territory after dawn, you will be executed." Garrett's expression twisted with fury. "You've destroyed yourself, cousin. The traditionalists will never accept. Then they can leave with you." Theron turned his back on Garrett and crossed to where Mira still stood in wolf form, her golden fur matted with sweat and Garrett's blood. He knelt beside her. "Come back to me," he whispered. Mira's wolf whined. She didn't know how to shift back, didn't know how to control this body that felt both foreign and perfectly right. Theron's hand found her muzzle, gentle and warm. "Trust the bond," he said. "I've got you." She closed her eyes and reached for the connection between them, that blazing thread of gold and silver that tied her soul to his. The shift back was easier, gentler. When Mira opened her eyes, she was human again, kneeling on the throne room floor with Theron's arms around her. The remaining court members stared. Theron helped her to her feet and turned to face them. "There will be no more half-blood hunts in my kingdom," he said. His alpha voice carried to every corner of the chamber. "No more forced claimings. No more blood laws that punish people for the circumstances of their birth. Anyone who cannot accept this is free to follow Lord Garrett into exile. No one moved. Theron took Mira's hand and led her to the throne. He sat. Then he pulled her down beside him. "This is Mira," he said. "My mate, your queen, and the first will burn this kingdom to ash before I let anyone harm her." Captain Aldrich was the first to kneel. Then Elena from the archive. One by one, the court followed. The chant began softly at first, then grew until it filled the hall. "Long live the king. Long live the queen." Mira looked at Theron, and he looked back at her, and the bond between them blazed like sunlight, visible to everyone, undeniable, complete. She had spent 15 years hiding, running, pretending to be something she wasn't because the world had taught her that what she was would get her killed. But Theron had looked at the truth of her and chosen her anyway, had rewritten the laws, had risked his throne, had claimed her in front of the entire kingdom, and dared anyone to take her from him. Mira's fingers tightened on his. "Thank you," she whispered. Theron lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "I would do it again," he said quietly, 1,000 times over. The court was still kneeling, still chanting, and for the first time in 15 years, Mira didn't have to hide. She could stand in the light, because the right person hadn't asked her to pretend. He had rewritten the world so she could finally be seen. 6 months had changed everything. The old blood laws were gone. Burned in the courtyard the morning after Garrett's exile, their ashes scattered to the wind. In their place, Theron and Mira had written new laws, laws that recognized half-bloods as citizens, that made forced claiming a crime punishable by death, that gave every person in the kingdom the right to choose their own fate. Half-bloods had begun to emerge from hiding. A baker in the lower city, a blacksmith's apprentice, a young girl who had spent her entire life pretending to be human, just like Mira had. They came to the palace in ones and twos, tentative and cautious, and Mira welcomed each of them personally. The court had adapted. Some of the traditionalist nobles had followed Garrett into exile. Others had stayed, grudging but respectful, watching as their new queen proved herself in council after council. Mira's voice carried weight now, equal to Theron's. When she spoke, people listened. It still felt strange sometimes. Evening light slanted through the windows of the royal chambers, warm and golden. Mira stood at the writing desk, reviewing proposed amendments to the citizenship laws, when Theron's arm slipped around her waist from behind. "You're working too late again," he murmured against her hair. "So are you." His hand splayed across her stomach. Still flat, still secret. But not for much longer. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Tired. Hungry. Happy." Theron turned her gently to face him. His thumb traced the claiming mark on her neck, the silvery scar that had become her favorite thing about her reflection. "I would make the same choice," he said quietly, 1,000 times over. Mira's hand covered his. "I know." She smiled. "I stopped running the moment you chose me over the crown. I chose you over everything. And gained a kingdom in return." Theron's expression softened. "I gained you. The kingdom was just a bonus." He led her to the balcony. The city spread out below them, lights beginning to flicker on as dusk deepened into night. Somewhere in those streets, half-bloods were living openly for the first time in generations. Children were being born who would never have to hide. Change was slow, messy, imperfect. But it was happening. Mira's hand rested on her stomach, on the secret they would share with the council next week. A child, half-royal, half-blood, wholly theirs. Theron's arm settled around her shoulders, pulling her close. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "The future." Mira leaned into him, breathing in cedar and steel and home. "Our child. The kingdom. Everything we still have to build. Scared?" "No." She turned her head to look at him, at the man who had seen every hidden part of her and loved her anyway. Not anymore. Because she wasn't running, wasn't hiding, wasn't pretending to be something she wasn't just to survive. She was standing in the light, beside the person who had rewritten the world so she could finally be free. And that was worth everything. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If it moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this tale of hidden identities and destined love, there are more stories waiting for you. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let ourselves be seen. Sweet dreams, and I'll see you in the next one.